Welcome into the Blogger Bowl Week 5 recap, Week 6 early lines. I'm not even doing an intro. I'm not even thanking Home Field Apparel for the shirts that they make us buy. Dan, just you have the floor. What do you hate most about Oklahoma?
Everything. Do you guys know why?
Oh, I like that answer. Covering all fields.
Do you guys know why Texas doesn't fall into the ocean? Because Oklahoma sucks so hard. And with that
one. I've never heard that one.
We'll talk about the line a little bit later.
I will get into that one even more so next year on Thursday too. But it's rivalry week. It's Oklahoma week. I wanted just to get this started on the right way.
The biggest game in the Big 12. The third biggest game in the Big 12 this week.
It is the only game in the Big 12 this week that doesn't feature a ranked team playing in it.
That's
first time since 98, I think, that both teams are unranked. First time since 2009 that Texas is favored.
I'm kind of surprised Texas hasn't snuck in as ranked yet. Somehow.
I still
Texas was ranked. Texas jumped to they were unranked, jumped to 14th, and then went back to unranked when they lost to Tech. So
that's what I'm saying. I would have thought maybe after West Virginia winning all the teams losing from 17 to 25 last week that maybe they'd have snuck back into 25-24.
I mean, I don't want to derail this too much talking about Texas, but they did play surprisingly. I thought they played really well against West Virginia on Saturday. It's a stress-free, other than my general neuroses, stress-free win. You'll take that every day in the Big 12, given as much of a bloodbath as that conference has proven to be this year. And we'll talk about the big game in the week from the Big 12 a little bit later in the show. But we'll start with what was the biggest game of the week. NC State going down to Clemson, a 30-20 win for Clemson. I will get this out of the way now because I don't want to spend time on this. I don't know what the referee saw to not give NC State the ball on the fumble right before halftime.
It made no sense.
However, I think the garbage time touchdown NC State scored at the end of the game kind of cancels it out in terms of final score. I think a 10-point Clemson win is a fair win in this game. I didn't get to see enough of Devin Leary that I wanted to see. I don't know that we got to see Devin Leary cook the rare instances that we did. I thought he made some really nice throws. However, I don't know what Devin Leary could have done, because when we talked about Clemson before the season started, I told you guys I thought that they were a very clear number 4 team in the country. Maybe I underestimated Michigan a little bit there, but my whole thesis was that they have a really good defensive line and a really good defense. And if their offense is just better, they don't have to be great. If their offense was just better, they're going to be very difficult to beat. The defensive line played on Saturday like I thought they were going to play against Wake Forest. They completely dominated that game. They held NC State to 4.32 yards per play. They had 3 sacks, 1.6 yards per carry allowed. And Clemson, I still don't think DJ Ucla is that great, but they have figured out a way to be efficient on offense with him as their quarterback. And that's basically just to use him as a battering ram and run the ball with him a lot. I kind of wonder if they you never, if you're a team, you don't want your starting quarterback to get hurt. But part of me in the back of my head is they kind of might feel that Cade Klubnik gives them pretty good upside throwing the ball, so that if DJ were to get dinged up, you might want to, if your backup situation's bad, you might want to protect your quarterback running the ball a little bit more than Clemson. And that doesn't appear to be the case, but a very efficient win for them. The offense looked good. The defense looked good. And if this is a team that's going to get to the playoff and a team that is going to contend for a national championship, which I don't think they're going to be able to beat any of the other teams, but if they are, and if they're going to get there, this is the kind of performance that is the blueprint for how they're going to do it.
Yeah, I think you made a good point about there with DJ and how Clemson kind of figured out they seemed how to use him, but it seemed like they were comfortable using him that way because they are so comfortable with Cade Klubnik as their backup, that if something were to happen, if DJ were to tweak a shoulder and be out for a half or miss a game or two, they don't actually feel all that uncomfortable turning it over to him. Clemson was the better team, and they're probably going to win the game anyways. I thought the decision to not review that fumble down at the goal line was ridiculous. And I also thought it was very strange that Kirk and Chris just immediately didn't even bring it up. They just immediately dismissed it, said, "Oh, no fumble there," and kept talking about the spot. I thought that was a little bit strange. But for me, we talked about Dave Doran needing to let Devin cook, and he did that to an extent, but that first drive was just kind of the game in a nutshell for me. Leary made some big-time throws, including the one over the shoulder that got him down to 1st and goal. That was just a pro throw in between a safety and a corner, just fitted exactly where he wanted to. You have 1st and goal from the 7. you run the ball twice and you don't really let Leary take shots at the end zone. And I thought that was they almost got down there. They were down 3-0. It was like, all right, let's be careful. Let's not do anything too stupid. Let's almost play for a field goal. And I thought that was kind of the game in a nutshell. It felt like they kind of took the leash off, but when they really, really got down to it, it was more playing not to lose than playing to win. And that was never going to beat Clemson.
Because again, we saw that first drive and we saw some of the throws that Leary clearly can make and was making, and the momentum that they can build when it does that. And there's like, or we could just run 3 straight times in the goal line instead of use our quarterback who got us down here. Again, my conspiracy theory bells were ringing like crazy when Herbstreit and Fowler were like, that's not a fumble, not even close to a fumble. Let's all move on. Don't pay attention to that, anybody. And you go on Twitter, everyone's like, it's clearly a fumble. It's a fumble. Matt and I were texting, like, I saw the replay. I'm like, because I heard them say that and like, okay, it's probably not a fumble. They showed it one more time, like, that's clearly a fumble. And they showed the replay like 3 or 4 times, and it was so clearly, not even like close, but so clearly a fumble that it's just like, how does that happen in the biggest spotlit game in college football? And then it's not like they, usually when that happens in the second half, they're like, hey, something we should talk about is look at this first half play. This was actually a fumble. Things could have been different. They missed it. It just was gone from that point on. So it was a little bit of a weird broadcast for me, how they were so heavily just like, hey, Clemson, everything in Clemson's favor. I get it's probably better for college football, and I don't actually think there's a conspiracy there, but in my brain, I'd like to just hammer that. And again, I think when looking at, I had the same thought with DJ running the ball. However, something that's kind of stood out to me a little bit is that at least in the first half, when he was going to take those runs, he was taking some direct shots and really getting blown backwards. So for me, I think with him slimming down a little bit, he's lost some of that, like, more big body, push forward, dominate, and deliver the blow. Maybe that's because he's protecting himself a little bit. But as you mentioned, that's something to monitor going forward, because that's the game plan that works for Clemson right now. And they're not scared to do it, because if he gets hurt, it's like, hey, that's a bummer. He's a leader on our team. But the offense needs to be a little bit more dynamic if he's not at the helm. So we'll see. One thing I do want to mention, I have to give some compliments to Will Shipley. He played his ass off. He's a fun player to watch play. That touchdown that was a fumble, the catch was unbelievable. His enthusiasm, his hard running is pretty contagious. And so for me, that was the first time where it's like, you don't want to root for a team, but you see an individual player doing something, you're like, all right, that guy's a player that I want to root for, and wish Notre Dame would have got him last year, but it is what it is.
Yeah, he's fun to watch.
I was just like, I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about this thing, and then you guys are like, hey, we're going to talk about this thing a lot.
Because I'm still mad about it. I can't let it go.
Yeah, I still don't know how they didn't at least review it, or at least come to a conclusion that, like, hey, the call stands on the field. But I thought that was.
I hear you. I think ultimately at the end of the day, I don't know that NC State was going to be able to make enough plays against that defense. It also felt like watching that every first down was nothing. Like, they were behind the chains so much in that game, NC State, particularly early, that they never really could get any rhythm going on offense, because if you get into 3rd and long against Clemson and that defensive line can pin their ears back and get after it, it's going to create a bad situation a lot of the times. Like, sometimes they're not going to get home, and Wake Forest took advantage of that, but they really elevated their play. And if you look at their schedule, like, who's the toughest team that they have to play left on the road? Like, I think Florida State is the best offense they have to play. Is that game in Tallahassee or is that game at Clemson?
I want to say I thought they had to go there. I'll pull that up. Hold on.
Yeah,
you guys talk amongst
but
yourselves.
The schedule's not daunting. Miami, I mean, we'll get a good look at what Miami is after the embarrassment against Middle Tennessee.
They do go to Florida State.
Okay. And that's probably their toughest game, because the Miami game is in Clemson, right?
What about
they got Miami at home.
Syracuse coming to Clemson could be
our guy, the Magic Johnson tweeter of college football, Sean Tucker. Awesome, but yeah, no.
No, they're gonna I think they're gonna get killed. But
interested to see what Miami has this week. But yeah, I mean, that Florida State game, maybe we'll talk about the Florida State game in a little bit. Moving on, the big news item of the week: Alabama at Arkansas. It's a 49-26 win for the Crimson Tide. However, Bryce Young exited the game in the first half with a sprained AC joint in his throwing shoulder. Nick Saban has said after the game, and said also earlier this week, that he just couldn't put any steam on the ball when he tried to throw it. He also said that he's had this injury before, and it usually responds well after a couple of days of treatment. Don't want to spin too far ahead to the A&M game or what is coming the week after that. Probably can beat A&M without him this week if Jalen Milroe just doesn't turn the ball over. But I did want to talk a lot about Alabama, or more about Alabama, but my first note that I wrote was just so extremely disappointed Arkansas is going to waste KJ Jefferson because they're so bad on defense. Before Bryce Young got hurt, there were just some alarming coverages from Arkansas. There was like one of the long touchdown, the DB was like 10 yards off the ball. It was like a slant, and he still got beat on it. That defense was terrible. The offense is a lot different with Milroe. Obviously, he's not the passer Bryce Young is. There are very few quarterbacks in the country who can be. Arkansas, to their credit, I mean, they will fight hard under Sam Pittman. They got back in it. They got the onside kick. They got close. But Milroe had that 77-yard run. They scored the touchdown. That was it. Jahmyr Gibbs, also a good idea without Bryce Young to just give the ball to him, 206 yards. Arkansas did not quit. Like I said, Alabama, though, had a 0.33 EPA. So basically they were averaging about 1/3 of a point on every offensive play they ran with a backup quarterback. So 49-26, this got dicey. And at the end of the day, Alabama ends up covering. And now we just play wait and see with Bryce Young.
Yeah, for
Jahmyr
me,
Gibbs was good. Go ahead,
it was looking at like, oh man, Bryce Young's gone. This game's getting tight. Backup quarterback's coming in. Oh man, this is about to get, and then it's just the most Alabama thing ever. It's like, oh, actually, our backup quarterback is a freak athlete. Plus out a 70-yard touchdown run. But again, I was just, what is Arkansas doing in the secondary? As you mentioned, it's not even necessarily like scheme, it's alignment. Like, hey, we're going off Alabama against Bryce Young. We're gonna, again, as opposed to make these receivers beat us, we're just gonna give them the ball in space and then allow them to beat us. As a former DB, like that is incredibly frustrating because there's so much you can do from a pre-snap alignment standpoint to take that away. Just line up a shade inside to protect your insides, as opposed to, hey, I'm going to go 10 yards, get beat when he does a head fake outside at 5 yards, jump outside that I'm further already than I am, and then let them take it 80 yards to the house. It's just like simple alignment and coaching things there, which against Alabama, it's like, hey, what should you do? At the very least, protect the middle of the field. And it's just like, what are we going to do? Give them the middle of the field. So when I see things like that, it's just frustrating, and you're never giving yourself a chance. But I did like the way that Arkansas fought. There was for everyone, it was thank you, Matt, for telling me the first half plus or minus 10 Alabama. That one cashed super quickly and super easily. And then they gifted you the nice 38 in the second half as well.
Ooh, I was scared when Bryce Young went down there 28-0 or whatever it was. I was like, you kidding me? They were going to get 50 this game, and then he went down.
But then Arkansas's defense. So again, it's a situation where Arkansas, it was fun for a minute when Arkansas was in the game, but overall, this is a game that Alabama won pretty handily.
Yeah, Alabama went back to being like, not old school Alabama is the wrong word, 'cause it's not even that long ago, but like they just said, we're Alabama, you're not, we're going to run the ball all over you. And when Bryce Young got hurt, and that's exactly what they did. Like they averaged 7.5 yards a carry on 40+ attempts. Like it was like, oh, cool, our quarterback's down, that's fine. We're just going to run the ball down your throat. You can't do a damn thing about it. And Jahmyr Gibbs broke some big runs, and that was Alabama getting back to being Alabama in a spot where, like where you said, Phil, it seemed like it could have gotten tricky a little bit. They just took a deep breath, decided they were going to control the football, and that's exactly what they did, and it was never really that close again. So I was very impressed with Alabama this week because there was some adversity, and they just didn't even need to shake it off because, I mean, they lasted for about half a quarter, and then they were just back to being themselves. But I was been impressed with Jahmyr Gibbs all year, but man, he was fantastic in that one.
Yeah, I think one of the ways that if your offensive line is maligned and struggled, I think one of the ways that you can open up the run game is have a quarterback who you have to account for in the running game, which, you know, for everything that Bryce Young does well, he moves well in the pocket. He can scramble if he has to, but it's not really something that he prefers to do. And obviously, Milroe very comfortable doing that. One-time Texas commit Jalen Milroe, but I think Texas is doing all right in the quarterback.
I think they're doing okay at the quarterback position
okay.
now. I'm excited to see Bama's approach against A&M this weekend.
Me too.
It's a big spread. Do we know what the total is on that one? I know we'll get into it later.
I don't have it off the top of my head. I can look at it later. A&M team total under might be a look this week.
Yeah, that one seems like Alabama 15. Runs the ball a million times and wins that game 31-3.
Max Johnson has negative 38 yards rushing.
What was when they played? God, it wasn't when they played Clemson in the playoff. Wasn't it like the 1 year? after Deshaun, wasn't it like a 24-7?
They beat
kind of
Kelly
game?
Bryant and Clemson 24-6, and like technically on the scoreboard, Clemson was in the game. Clemson was just never.
That's
in it.
kind of what
The
it
defense
feels
played
like.
fine, but they were just never in it.
It kind of feels like what's going to happen against A&M on Saturday if Bryce Young can't play. Like, there's no reason for Alabama playing at home in that game to risk anything on offense with Milroe. Just do what you do.
And it'll be interesting to track Alabama's average starting field position. I think that'll be something that'll be really interesting because I bet they're going to, like, the average starting field position is going to be like the 45, because while their offense might not run or will not run as smoothly, they're going to keep pinning A&M back, and it's going to be a punt fest from A&M.
Can't wait to watch it. I've started to really dislike Texas A&M. I don't really know why.
Yeah.
But like, there's just something there that annoys me about them, and it's fun to see them fail so miserably this year after talking so much crap about getting the number 1 recruiting class last year.
Jimbo's a fraud. All right, moving on. A game I added to the list today because I don't think any of us anticipated that this was a game that we were going to need to talk about on Thursday, so we didn't even bring it up in any form or fashion. Georgia 26, Missouri 22. Georgia goes into Columbia, a night game. Look, good teams, great teams even can have bad nights on the road. Understand not being up for a game in Columbia, which is a weird place where weird things can happen. Turnovers were definitely a killer for Georgia, but beyond that, like, watching it, there were some like concerning things for Georgia. They gave up some chunk plays on defense. Again, we talked about how there might be a situation where this defense is a little bit gettable this year. The Georgia offensive line was really bad in this game. They allowed 10 tackles for a loss here. So in the second quarter of this game, Missouri's up 13-3. They rip off a 63-yard run down to the 1-yard line and then get a false start because their crowd is making too much noise cheering for Missouri. And so their own crowd forces a false start, backs them up to the 6. Georgia gets a stop and holds them to a field goal. If that false start doesn't happen and Missouri can punch it in 4 chances from the 1-yard line, even against that Georgia defense, feels like something you probably should do. It's a 20-3 game early in the, right around halftime. That could have been a bad situation for Georgia to try to come back from. And then you watch, and they needed Stetson Bennett to make some throws, and he threw for over 300 yards, but just eye test stuff. He was missing throws. There were bad throws that just like a really disjointed performance for Georgia. They have I have their game this week on the list of games for lines, a really good get right rebound spot for them on Saturday. But Missouri's not very good, and a 4-point win in a game you very well could have lost is kind of like warning signs.
Yeah, two straight weeks where you're kind of like scratching your head. You're kind of like, what's going on with this Georgia team after them coming out so dominant? And it's not like a series of injuries. Maybe it's like drinking their own Kool-Aid a little bit. But I mean, it was a situation where you go into that game, they go down early, and I think from a fan perspective and just someone watching the game, you're like, okay, Georgia's going to turn it on here soon. Okay, they're going to turn it on here soon. And you just kind of kept waiting, and they just never really turned it on. And it reminded me of, honestly, some like Brian Kelly Notre Dame games where it's just like, if you're a Georgia fan, you just like grit your teeth through the entire game. And you almost as like a Bears fan too, Matt knows this, where it's like they win the game, but the entire game, you're just like, you're just butthole clenched. There's our first one for the day. And you're just like, ugh, this game just feels terrible throughout the whole thing. So I was really impressed with the speed of, less impressed with the speed of Missouri's defense, with like the lack of effort and intensity from Georgia's offensive line. Because it's like, if you look at that game, if you never knew the rankings, you'd be like, man, this must be like a top 10 Missouri team, right? It's like, no, they're just playing really fast, or Georgia is just not up for this game. So again, 2 weeks in a row, they have another get right game this week, but this is definitely alarm bells. Really, for the first time this season for Georgia. Last week was like, it doesn't really matter. They won comfortably. Kent State put up some points, not a big deal. This week, like, okay, we probably could have lost. So I'm feeling a lot less confident in Georgia and a lot more confident in Ohio State as we get down the stretch.
I still feel pretty confident in Georgia. This is the first time in like a year and a half we even had to sound an alarm bell on them because they're so good last year. They're so good this year. I would like to think that these last couple games, if, like you said, Phil, drinking the Kool-Aid a little bit of a young defense, some young talent, replacing some really talented guys last year, drinking the Kool-Aid a little bit, and you having a fine quarterback, but not a elite quarterback to kind of cover up those warts, which he wasn't able to do. But eventually they still came out with the win. But yeah, this felt like, as Notre Dame fans can relate, one of those weird Brian Kelly games, like at home against Toledo last year, where it's like, all right, when are they going to win? When are they going to win? They finally did. But I think the real story from this game was Harrison Mevis,
Mevis.
The thicker kicker who redemption from last week. I mean, you saw the end of the Auburn-Mizzou game, I'm assuming, last week, where he missed the glorified extra point to win the game in regulation.
Where Auburn fans booed Missouri missing the game-winning kick because Auburn fans want to be done with Brian Harsin.
Yeah, and I'm kind of surprised they're not, honestly, after the game on Saturday. But the two just drilled 52-yarders, and that was the first time. The second one was the first time and probably the only time where I allowed myself to be like, Missouri might actually win this game. This kid just drilled back-to-back 52-yarders right in Georgia's face. Who does I blanking on who Georgia has this week? I know it's a get-right game. It's Auburn. That's a a get-right game.
Yeah,
their goal on it. This might sound dumb, but their goal should be to get Brian Harsin fired this weekend. Like that, if Georgia wants to get right, and it should be a bad enough win where it's like, all right, we gotta go. Like, you're done.
Yeah,
that's how they need to look this weekend, in my opinion. If they don't look that way and it's just kind of another sleepy effort, I'm gonna raise a red flag or two.
I don't disagree with that assessment at all. Moving on to the Big 12. One of the better, more entertaining games of the day, at least amongst the big games. Oklahoma State 36, Baylor 25. Here's a fun fact for you they showed during the broadcast. Spencer Sanders became the second Power 5 quarterback since 2007 to throw 10-plus career interceptions against one opponent. Alex Brink from Washington State did that against Oregon State. Oklahoma State scored right before halftime, took the opening kickoff back for a touchdown to start the second half. It's 23-3. It looks like they're going to run away with it. He then throws that interception that I mentioned, and then suddenly that allows Baylor to get back in it. But he made an absolutely beautiful throw to set up a touchdown that basically gave them the margin they needed. Baylor threw an interception late. Gavin Holmes, a wide receiver for them, made a couple of plays he's going to wish that they had back. He had a ball go through his hands for an interception that basically sealed it. So a big win for Oklahoma State, a game that Baylor had a chance to win. Baylor's defense struggled. I mean, I think you're going to see kind of one of the things that's going to set them apart, at least why a team like Baylor is not a team like Georgia, obviously, is they lost a lot of guys, a lot of really good players to the NFL, and that's going to just take them. It's not going to be an immediate, like, okay, we lost all these guys, suddenly our defense is just going to be great again. Their defense is solid against a good, efficient offense. They're going to struggle a little bit. That's what happened here. Mike Gundy should have lost this game. Oh, my God, they're up 13. They have a 4th and goal from the 1, and he kicks a field goal to go up by 16. Like, whatever. And then I think
non-analytics.
Yeah. And to further Matt's man crush on Dave Aranda, add me to that list just because he had the stones for it to go for a
4th and 2 from like his own
14-yard line. They converted.
And got it. I loved it.
It didn't work out. I have a question off of this game, spinning something ahead that I wanted to ask you guys, but I want you to get your take on this game first.
I will say what you said describing Baylor, I think, is exactly right. They're not a Georgia, they're not an Alabama, they're not an Ohio State that's able to handle those losses of NFL talent and immediately be a top team again. But they have gotten to the point where they're good enough to be an 8-4, be a 9-3 team, which is probably where they'll end up at this year. The Big 12, like we've talked about the last few weeks, is actually really good. So if they go 8-4 in this conference, the year after losing a ton of NFL talent, I think that's actually a very good year for them. Also, I wish I knew the uniform matchup before I picked Baylor, because there was no chance Baylor was winning in the all yellows. That was stupid. I didn't know that's what they were wearing. I should have looked it up. Oklahoma State's all whites were really clean. Love the look. There was no way that those uniforms were losing to the all yellows. So hands up, that's on me. Baylor should just retire those uniforms for good because they stink.
Yeah, and it's, again, no one likes getting mustard on white shirts, so it's a situation where Baylor was not going to tackle them. That's my stupid metaphor of the day.
That's really good. That's a good one. I really hate to admit when you make a funny, but that was good.
Thank you. But again, Aranda's a really good coach, and this is going to be a fun team to watch until hopefully, I mean, not hopefully, but I think he could be a coach where he could go to a bigger program because they're going to be calling him if they want it. So I'm curious to see what he does over the next couple of years. again, not too much on this game other than it was, Baylor was outmatched. And it was kind of sad to see. But again, Baylor's a fun team to watch. Quick uniform update for this week. Matt, have you seen what our balls are wearing?
No, what are we wearing?
They're wearing the smoky gray, which I hate. Oh,
I
God,
don't
hate
love
them.
that.
They're not
I'm
as
not
bad as
gonna
the
lie to
all
you.
black that Tennessee wears.
I thought they
Oh,
would.
man. You guys are going to make me go on the rant, and I didn't want to go on this rant. I wanted to go on something else about this game. Remind me of the uniform rant when we get to the odds. I will probably remember it. I will probably remember it, what I want to say, and I'm sure you guys probably have an idea of where I'm going to go when we talk about this, but I'll save it. I'll put a pin in it for now. Here's the question I wanted to ask you guys real quick.
Sure.
Who is more likely? I know the actual answer is neither. Yes, I know the answer is neither. Who is more likely to make the college football playoff out of the Big 12, Oklahoma State or Kansas State?
I got to look at schedule. Honestly,
Kansas State's currently undefeated, right?
Kansas State lost to Tulane. So the answer is Oklahoma State.
The answer is Oklahoma State because they haven't lost the game yet. And they lost to Tulane.
And they're the best team in the conference. So I am trying to rack my brain and figure out why Spencer Sanders is between like 40 and 50 to 1 to win the Heisman Trophy, and Adrian Martinez is now the 5th favorite. Like, Adrian Martinez lost to Tulane. He's not winning the Heisman Trophy. Like, did Kansas got sports betting on September 1st, and did all these Kansas State fans just rush to the window and start betting on Adrian Martinez to win the Heisman Trophy? Like,
I truly think that's it.
I don't like looking into the camera very often because I actually like being. It might seem weird, but I'm actually looking at you guys on my monitor, which is why I never
actually look at the camera.
But I'm going to look into the camera right now and just tell you: do not bet on Adrian Martinez to win the Heisman Trophy. Don't do it. On that note, by the way, we are an Alabama win against Tennessee, and what was the other one? Oh, a USC loss at Utah away from next weekend. So October 15th away from CJ Stroud being minus money to win the Heisman Trophy.
Yeah, probably right.
Moving on. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say I agree with you there on Oklahoma State, and I think that the Kansas State fans got really excited with obviously just getting betting like a month ago, and then he goes on the road and wins that big game at Oklahoma and has the second straight big game against Texas Tech, and he's putting up all these numbers. I think that's exactly it. Kansas is just throwing all their money at him.
It's crazy. All right.
Soon it'll be Jalen Daniels.
Well, he did make a huge jump after they beat Duke, and then his numbers took a hit after the Iowa State game. Like, we'll get into the TCU game in good detail on Thursday. They should have lost to Iowa State on Saturday. Like, that was
but they didn't.
Our
guy Matt Campbell can't win those close spreads.
You're Matt Campbell. Oh, good Lord. That's not on the list, though. Moving on. Wake Forest 31, Phil's Knowles, unfortunately 21. Wake Forest was 7 for 11 on third downs, 2 for 2 on fourth downs in the first half. They were up 21-7. They had a 62% success rate on late downs. It just felt like Florida State almost got out-athleted in this game by Wake Forest, which is very weird. But then Wake Forest got like ultra conservative in the second half when they really didn't seem to want to like just bury Florida State. So Florida State kind of hung around. But Wake Forest jumped out to a big lead. They did enough. Usually the way we've been going, me, Matt, then Phil, but this is Phil's Knoll. So, Phil, what was your take on a tough loss for your boys?
I mean, I've been a believer in Florida State, and this doesn't really take away from that because, again, it's in a game where it looks like they were going to get blown out, whether it was conservative play calling by Wake Forest, which it was. They didn't quit and put themselves in a position to, like, kind of be in this game. In which the past like 3 or 4 years, they just fold and their players give up. And so even though this is a loss, and I really thought this loss was going to happen, I thought it was going to be pretty close, but I think this is if there's a good loss for Florida State to have, I think this is a good loss because it's like, hey, we lost, but we came back at the end, didn't get embarrassed, was pretty close against a Wake team who should have beat Clemson the week before. So a very good Wake team that, again, people who didn't watch the game go away from that game like, hey, that was a pretty close game, when in reality wasn't that close, right? And so I'm still a believer in Florida State. I love watching Johnny Wilson. He's turned into one of my favorite receivers in college football. Just 6'7", long as hell. And just making some just great catches. And so again, it's not often that you see a 6'7" guy streaking down the field, but when you do, it's just like it's just kind of like watching a gazelle in a nature documentary. It's just something about it that's really pretty. Or him going on the sideline and like, hey, I can stretch over 7 feet like out of bounds to catch a ball. For me, there's just something and a bit intoxicating about that. Again, I'm glad that Wake Forest bounced back. I think Wake is still a really good team. But this is again a little bit of a step back for Florida State, because I know they're looking to win this and make a statement win game here. But they've shown that they're a legitimate top 25 program on both sides of the ball. Not a top 15, not a top 10, but a very legitimate top 10, top 25 program, which is something that they haven't been able to say in quite some time outside of like fluky wins here or there. So I think there's a lot more stability to the program now, and they're headed in the right direction. The seat is very cool for the head coach right now, which is something that I think a lot of people were really hesitant about going into this year, but I had just, for some reason, optimism about the program. And I think the kind of ship sails on with them.
Yeah, this is one that, like, going into this game, when we talked about it on Thursday, all of us like, why is Wake Forest an underdog and why are they a 6.5 point underdog? That one just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And not just us, I feel like everybody kind of felt that way. But Phil, you kind of took the words out of my mouth. I feel like this is not a bad loss for a Florida State team. Obviously, Wake got out to the big lead and they played conservative, held on. I feel like both teams kind of leave this one feeling okay about themselves, because Wake really, on that sideline, if you're a Wake Forest player coach, that game was never really in doubt. You took the big lead, you dominated, and then you just kind of ran out the clock. That was fine. But if you're Florida State, like you said, this program the last 4 or 5 years was kind of embarrassing. Like, they would have these types of games where they would never even compete, or they'd go down early and just quit. And Wake Forest gave them a chance to come back into the game, but like Florida State took it. Like, Jordan Travis played okay, didn't turn the ball over, threw 3 touchdowns. Like, Florida State crawled themselves back into it to give themselves a quote unquote chance to win the game late, even though they never really were in that. But like, I feel like it's something for them to build on, because if you're Florida State, with how far back they were and how bad they've been over the last few years, you were never going to jump into being a top 15, top 10 program overnight. But like you said, they've established themselves in that top 25. So I think this was obviously you like to win this one, but I don't think you leave this game feeling bad about yourself.
And spoiler alert, I love the Knolls this weekend. Love them.
I was like, I forgot who they're playing. In the
NC State.
That's going to be an interesting one as well. The last game on the slate. Oh, by the way, before we move on to the last game, I just cannot point out how hilarious it is and how much the Florida State program has fallen, that they lost by double digits at home to Wake Forest, and you're both like, it's not that bad of a loss. The final game on the slate, Kentucky 22, Ole Miss 22, Kentucky 19. I don't have a lot to say on this other than these are like 8 to 10 win teams who are very good but aren't going to beat Georgia or Alabama on their best day. Kentucky lost 11 points on turnover luck, 4 points on special teams, so that's 15 points in a game they lost by 3.
And I think Kentucky fans are going to bitch about the non-targeting call, which definitely had some validity.
It was targeting.
Definitely targeting, but like, I think you come away from this game and look at Kentucky for this season, same with Ole Miss, as you mentioned, Dan, these are like, hey, 8 to 9 to 10 win teams that could maybe play in a New Year's Six game or a prominent bowl game and probably lose to a random team. Like, these are just like solid, to like top 20-ish teams, but they're going to get, I think, blown out by the upper echelon of the SEC when they play them. That's kind of it. It was just, it wasn't that exciting of a game. And I'm still tricked, especially when seeing the Baby Blues of Ole Miss, thinking Lane Kiffin, thinking that like the laser show is going to come out on offense, but that's just not them this year. And like, you warned me about that. And like you can't like teach me. Like, I am like very much an old dog. I'm like, okay, they're going to have these like high-powered.
If I see those uniforms, they're worth 50 points.
Although I will say at halftime, I had chalked up that under as a loss, and then they combined for 10 points in the second half, and it actually ended up being a pretty easy.
Yeah, the under cruised. It wasn't really close.
Yeah.
That's all I have there.
Yeah, Dan, you and I talked about it a little bit this morning after Brown Bag. Like, both teams are solid, good football teams. They're not great football teams. Kentucky was a little bit overranked at 7. Ole Miss is probably right at about 4. Like, both teams are probably right around 14, 15, 16 best team in the country. And that's kind of what that was. I mean, it was hyped up as a big-time SEC matchup because they're 2 top 15 teams, but realistically, they're solid, maybe lower-tier New Year's Six teams, and there's nothing wrong with that for where those two programs are at. Ole Miss wasn't highly impressed with either team, but I thought both teams, like we said, good, fine football teams, but they're not going to compete with Georgia or Bama or any of those.
So that's it for the games that we have. There were 2 big news items this weekend in the world of college football. I'll talk about I want to talk about this one second. However, it kind of just goes to show where the Colorado program is where Colorado fires their coach. And then like a few hours later, the one that was a little bit more surprising, I think not surprising that it happened, but surprising that it happened in the middle of the season. Wisconsin moves on from Paul Chryst after an embarrassing loss. And Phil kind of gave us some idea that it might happen as Illinois absolutely just slaughtered Wisconsin. I think 34-10 was the final score there. But basically, you can't rush for 2 yards, lose by 24 points at home to a coach that your program fired previously and keep your job.
Left.
Huh?
He left.
Sorry, he left. Coach who left. That's probably even more embarrassing. A coach who left and keep your job. Paul Chryst won 72% of his games at Wisconsin, so firing him is certainly dicey, but I don't know that a renaissance was coming for him at Wisconsin. It feels like they had peaked and were probably descending. They're getting rid of divisions in the Big Ten soon. I don't know when that's happening. I'm assuming that's when USC and UCLA move in, and that's kind of one of the edges that they've had is that they don't have to play Ohio State and Michigan and Penn State every single year. Jim Leonard got the interim job. My read on the situation is that they want Jim Leonard to win the job. Their schedule is like, I tweeted it out. Their schedule is the perfect audition schedule for Wisconsin. They play at Northwestern. They play at Michigan State, home against Purdue and Maryland, at Iowa, at Nebraska, and then they end the season against Minnesota at home. I think Iowa's probably the only one of those games they'll be an underdog, but none of those games are gimmies. None of those games are games where they're expected to at least get blown out. So that's a seven game chance for Jim Leonard to show what he can do as a head coach. He's a Wisconsin guy, 3-time All-American. He's going to be 40 in a couple of weeks, was a highly thought of NFL player. He's a highly thought of young coach. So a lot of people hope he can get that job. Lance Leipold's name has been connected to it, but Lance Leipold's 58. So if they decide to go after Lance Leipold, I mean, you're guessing he's 10 years max there, where Jim Leonard's going to be 40. Like I said, a Wisconsin guy. So I think the read is they didn't want to risk losing him. And if it doesn't work out with him, they can go after Lance Leipold. Buyouts are also imaginary, so don't worry about a team's buyout ever again unless it's like $90 million at Texas A&M, which they might end up paying. But surprised it happened in the middle of the season, but kind of when you break it down the way I just did, like that was my thought process, it kind of makes more sense.
Yeah, I thought it might happen. It's mid-season or in season if it kept getting that bad, but I didn't think that was going to they got blown out at Ohio State, but like everybody, like a lot of teams get blown out at Ohio State. Paul Chryst gets blown out at Ohio State a lot. Like I didn't think that was going to be the final straw, or that Illinois, one really bad loss to Illinois was going to be the final straw. But you're right; they want to. I know a few Wisconsin fans, and they've all been kind of fed up with Paul Chryst. The recruiting has kind of tapered off. The program definitely has peaked with him and wasn't really getting any better. And they see Jim Leonard as might not be the future, but the guy that deserves a shot to be the future. And if you wait till he only has 3-4 games left in the season, that's probably not enough time. They're giving him, over half a season to audition for the job, and it's his job to win. I think you're right. It's basically, hey, Jim, go win the job, or else we're going to throw a bunch of money at Lance Leipold. And I don't think Lance Leipold was intending on leaving Kansas anytime soon, but I think given his ties to Wisconsin and coaching Whitewater forever, that's probably one of the few jobs that if they call, he'd be like, yeah, I kind of have to take that one. So it's Leonard auditioning or Leipold taking over next year, and it makes a whole lot of sense that they did it now. Even though Wisconsin apparently hadn't fired a coach in basketball or football since 1995.
Yeah.
I don't think they've ever fired a football coach in season either. I think I saw.
Yeah,
that.
I was.
It's the right move though. Good for them. I think it was the right thing to do.
I was shocked until you take a step back away from the shock factor and you're like, okay, where is this program going? And it's like nowhere. You can't have a Wisconsin team that's entire identity is defense and running the ball and get blown out by Illinois and rush for 2 yards when you have the best back in the country who rushes 8 times for 2 yards.
That's just second best back in the country, Chase Brown.
Notice I did say that because Chase Brown.
Well, now you just said best back.
Yeah, I know. Well, Chase Brown rushed for 134 yards. So shout out, he outrushed the entire Wisconsin team by 130 yards. So shout out Braden Tanzone, even though he's from Canada. But we're gonna forget about.
That's fine. You can take it.
But it makes sense. I was shocked when it happened, and my brain first went to the Bo Pelini effect. It's like, hey, this guy's won 9 games. How many times in the past 2 years? But at the same time, this situation feels a lot different, where it's like they have just been. It's not like one bad season. It's just a consistent form of mediocrity. And with their schedule, they're able to put these wins together. But like, I cannot imagine being a Wisconsin fan and watching that Illinois game. Like that's like wrapping up being a Bears fan the past 5 years and putting it all into one game. Like that just would be so terrible to watch. Like the one thing that we can do, we rush for 2 yards against, let me check my notes again, Illinois. But again, I'm not going to talk about Illinois too much. But the only thing is like pushes them into like the upper average teams of the Big Ten. So I'm excited that Illinois football is starting to improve because it's more fun being in Chicago, being in Illinois when, they're not terrible. That's just all I wanted to say.
Yeah, like Wisconsin hasn't been Wisconsin really since that year they went to the Big Ten championship and they got out to, it was like a 14-0 lead over Ohio State, and then Ohio State came back and won, but like played Ohio State tough in the Big Ten championship. They really haven't been Wisconsin since then. They've been kind of trending downwards, and they've really been fake Wisconsin. Like, yeah, they've been able to run the ball and play defense against bad teams, but like they used to play Michigan tough or really dominate Michigan on the line of scrimmage. Last couple times they've played Michigan, they've been absolutely dominated. Like they haven't been winning those big games with regularity like they used to win those games with regularity.
They still have the offensive line and the running back talent. They're just not doing like it's just not like now it's just not performing, right?
Can they just play anybody at quarterback other than Graham Mertz? He's
been there for like 10 years now, and he stinks.
The highest ranked quarterback recruit they ever signed, and he's bad.
Just
bad.
Get a transfer portal guy. Just
Hunter Johnson would be better than him at this point.
Yeah. Anybody would be.
And the other one, I mean, I know athletic departments don't look at gambling spreads, but Colorado was a 17.5 point underdog at Arizona and did not cover. Arizona finished with 673 total yards, its second highest output against an FBS opponent since 2000. I tweeted after that game ended that Carl Durrell might have to find his own transportation home. I'm not worried that wouldn't be surprised if that's actually what happened there. This is a difficult job. We talked about it a little bit in the past, but you have two regions who didn't want to approve Mel Tucker's contract, which is part of why he bolted in the first place. Like one of the regents has said previously, she's not sure if it's like sustainable for them to support football at Colorado. I just don't know that people want to have admit beyond the athletic department at that university and the University of Colorado system really care or want to have a football program, which is going to make it extremely difficult for any coach to succeed. They're probably going to just go get some retread or do something stupid because like what options do you have otherwise? I would encourage them to go the FCS route. Maybe Matt Entz from North Dakota State. We've seen that Craig Ball has done a pretty good job making Wyoming regularly competitive. Chris Kleiman's done a really good job at Kansas State. Maybe there's just something to this coaching tree at North Dakota State. The other guy who I really would be interested in if I were them is Troy Taylor, who's the head coach at Sacramento State, a pro. He is 22-7, and I think this is his third or fourth year of the COVID. They didn't play during the COVID season, so that's thrown everything off. But he's gotten them to the playoffs twice. Sacramento State, I think, has like a 43% winning percentage in their history, so not an FCS program that has won a lot. He's won a lot there in short order. They just beat a Mountain West team. They beat Colorado State, I think it was, by like 4 touchdowns or something like that the other day. He played at Cal. He coached at Utah before Sacramento State. You have to go out. If you're Colorado, you have to go out and get a coach who, like, the difference between FCS and Colorado is obviously the FCS, they don't have the resources. Colorado just doesn't want to commit the resources to it, but that's kind of the same situation that they're dealing with. But a job that should be attractive probably isn't all that attractive right now for a variety of reasons.
As long as they stay far, far, far away from Bob Chesney at Holy Cross. That is all I want. Because again,
that one doesn't make a ton of sense. I feel like if you're going the FCS route, you find someone regionally that knows the region.
He's a coach that I think we'll see in the next year or two go to a Division 1A program because he took, again, a historically like pretty average Holy Cross team, like a middle of the road Patriot League team, which is a bottom of the barrel like FCS conference generally outside of usually Fordham and sometimes Colgate. And so he's taken them to 3 straight playoffs, about to be 4 with a win and back-to-back wins over FBS teams. So he's a coach that's trending in the right direction. That has been when at Salve Regina, turned them around, won everything. Assumption turned them around, won everything. Holy Cross turned them around, won everything. But again, my heart is going to be crushed when he goes because it's like he's turned like Holy Cross like the cool place to play in FCS.
I just like how this is a conversation about Colorado that Phil managed to turn into a conversation about Holy Cross.
Relevant with the coach being an FCS, turning things around at multiple different levels.
That's fair. And this one was a little bit of a stretch, but not that big of a stretch.
Little bit of a stretch.
It was a stretch, but not like he's made much bigger stretches.
All right, a couple
I got nothing on this code. You guys covered it all. It's unfortunately turned into a bad job, which it should be an awesome job. It's a really cool stadium. It's really cool uniforms. It's really cool locker room facilities and stuff. You have a great mascot. It should be so cool, and it's just talk about another program like we were just talking about with Florida State, not to their extent, but like a program when we were kids was usually historically relevant and pretty darn good is just not.
Bring back Cordell Stewart.
Yeah. Oh no, he's not a good person.
Is he bad?
Sorry.
Not a good person. And then the other one, another thing that's really I didn't want to spend a ton of time on this, but it makes me think. Another name that's going to come up again, and I think is maybe more likely now than it was the last time they hired a head coach, but Eric Bieniemy, head coach or the offensive coordinator of the Kansas City Chiefs, Colorado legend, didn't take this job 2 years ago. I think we're getting further and further away from Eric Bieniemy being a head coach in the NFL. There's a very obvious reason why Eric Bieniemy is not a head coach in the NFL right now, and let's just say that some of the things that are, and there are definitely concerns about Eric Bieniemy being a head coach in the NFL. He and Patrick Mahomes do not get along. They do not like each other. They had a dust up at halftime of the AFC Championship game last year, and then they had the very public one a couple of weeks ago. Yeah. And I think that's part of it. I think people kind of realize that that's still Andy Reid kind of running the show there. However, I'm going to leave out the other reason why Eric Bieniemy hasn't gotten a head coaching job, because even with all of those faults, if some things were a little different for him, obvious things, he'd be a head coach now. So maybe he'd come back home now when it seems like he's getting further away from being a head coach in the NFL. I don't know that it would be a great hire. He has very limited experience coaching in college. He was the OC at Colorado in like 2010 and 2011 or something like that, and then coached there to start his career. But that's gonna be another name that's linked to it. I would just go with the FCS route.
Yeah, I feel like that's a band-aid. The FCS route seems like if you're going to do this, you got to build it from the ground up and get a guy that, someone that's built programs from the ground up in terms of recruiting and everything like that. So it seems like the FCS route's the way to go. Plus, it'll be a lot cheaper to go get an FCS guy than Eric Bieniemy.
That's also another thing. Just some quick hitters before we get to. I wanted to talk overtime game theory. Just shout out, the Cowards finally ranked Kansas. It's nice to see Kansas winning a game they should not have won. Iowa State really gagged that game away. However, great teams win games. How about, I talked about it as my game of the week, FIU going on the road, getting a big win. UConn getting a big win over Fresno State. Side note, the post Kalen DeBoer, Jake Haener, Fresno State might be a bad situation. But now FIU and UConn in whatever part of Miami. I don't know if it's Miami proper or whatever. But FIU, UConn in Miami on Saturday. Winner is going to be on a winning streak. So how about that for both of those teams? I'm going to skip this other note because that's not important. Saw the coaching change, QB loss, and overall player loss, and thought it was weird that Louisiana was the favorites to win the Sun Belt. Wanted to pull the trigger on South Alabama before the season because I knew some people had thought that team was going to be decent this year, and then South Alabama beats Louisiana, puts themselves in the driver's seat, had a chance to beat UCLA a couple of weeks ago. You talk about a coach who might be able to build something. Kane Womack, the head coach at South Alabama, who was built a really good defense quickly at Indiana that is no longer good once he left. I just want Kane Womack's going to be a coach that you hear a lot about. And I wanted to talk one cool thing I saw on Twitter this week from Division III football, because we love Division III football, and many a great human being has been produced from Division III football. Do you guys? A lot of them. Are you guys familiar with Thiel College? THIEL Thiel College. If I were to ask you what state, I don't even city, no shot. What state Thiel College is in?
Michigan.
Matt, you got a guess?
Florida.
Thiel College is in Greenville, Pennsylvania, which is northwest of Pittsburgh, kind of near Lake Erie, not far from Cleveland.
Same time zone.
Snapped a 41-game losing streak with a 27-26 win over Bethany College. Ironically enough, that's who they beat for their last win. They blew a 20-6 lead. They trailed 26-20, got a touchdown run from Jordan Collier to put them up, and then got a fourth down stop on the 22-yard line late to seal their first win in a couple of years. We'll shout out anyone who snaps a 41-game losing streak. Congratulations.
And that's merch, Thiel College.
What'd you say? Send us merch. They're the Tomcats, and I wanted
the teal Tomcats. I like. Are their colors teal and something?
I don't think so. I wanted to try.
That seems like a miss.
I did half-ass research to see if like they had a famous alumnus or president or founder named Thomas. and that's why they're the Tomcats. I couldn't find it. All right, so the last thing I want to talk about before we talk about the games, I'll try to do this real quick, is overtime theory and how the University of Houston has broken everybody's brains, because I saw people calling it the dumbest thing they've ever seen. Houston, they went to overtime for the third time this year. Like, what in the world is Dana Holgorsen doing? They went to overtime for the third time. They won the coin toss, and they elected to go on offense first, which they've done every time in overtime so far this season. And it seems counterintuitive to go on offense first. But Andy Staples from The Athletic did an article when they beat UTSA. Houston has a general manager, which is apparently a thing. Like, I thought when I read this, I thought it was like the Texans GM was consulting with them, but no, they actually have their own general manager. He started doing some research to see if there was actually merit to the idea of going on defense first, and discovered that over the past 7 years, the team on offense first in overtime won 54% of the games in the last 7 years. Now, that math is flawed because you're leaving out context like who's the better team, where's the game being played, so on and so forth. But that was good enough for Dana Holgorsen, who decided, okay, I'm just going to start doing this every time. An independent study has actually shown that there's actually not a discernible advantage to going first on defense in overtime. It doesn't really make a huge difference one way or another. Things like point spread, like the quality of the team based on point spread and red zone efficiency, is a much better predictor of overtime success. I just will say I appreciate anyone who is willing to challenge the way that we think about things in football, because we've always just thought, oh, go on defense first, duh. And there's nothing to suggest that that's going to necessarily be a winning strategy over time. Personally, I'd still prefer my team to go on defense first, because then obviously you know what you have to do. But just to the idea that this is the dumbest thing in the world to go first on offense in overtime is not actually the case. It actually really, over the balance, does not matter at all.
That was overtime with Professor Dan.
Yes, and that was overtime theory with Professor Dan.
I know we've been told our whole lives go on defense first, but
Right.
I mean the counter to that is if you go on offense first and you score a touchdown, now their offense has a lot of pressure on their shoulders, and then maybe it's all kind of the same thing. It's all literally just a coin flip pretty much at that point. It's whoever the better team is probably going to end up winning that football game.
I think I rendered Phil speechless. So we'll move on to the games. I can't count them up in my head of what I wrote down here. No real rhyme or reason, just kind of went off the ESPN scoreboard. For these games, we will start with a big one as Phil and Matt's friend Brian Kelly welcomes their favorite. I don't know if there could be a better non-Notre Dame matchup for you guys in terms of rooting interest than your Vols on the road against Brian Kelly. Tennessee at LSU. That was a long way to say all that. Open 3.5, Tennessee 2.5. Matt, your early thoughts on that one?
Oh man, the fact that it's that close of a spread kind of scares me a little bit, because I think Tennessee at home is like I would have thought would be like a 6.5 point favorite.
Tennessee's on the road.
I know I said if they're at home, it would be a 6.5 point favorite. But I think the fact that I think it opened at 3.5 and is already down to 2.5. I have watched a good amount of LSU this year. I haven't been too impressed. Like, they lost to Florida State, who is better than we thought now, but like they went down 17-0 at Auburn, but then found a way to win that game. And I don't know, Brian Kelly has a weird way of get ways to win football games at home and keep his team hanging around just long enough. And obviously that team is still pretty talented because they're LSU. I do like that Tennessee had the week off after Florida, because if I think this was coming right after the Florida win, like 1 week after, that LSU would win the game. I still think Tennessee wins this game, but I think this is a scary, scary spot for the Vols, especially with a little bit of a look-ahead spot next.
Yeah, this is going to be a tight one, and that's all I have to say. It's just going to be a tight game. It's going to be a good game. I think it's going to come down to Hooker making or not making a play to win the game, and it could be something where it's in the first half where it's like, hey, they can put the game away and really do something and kind of put the wind out of the sails, or not, or even late in the game. So this is just has the feel of a nail biter.
I guess I don't hate them wearing the all gray if LSU is going to be wearing the white. I don't hate it, but like I like their other uniforms.
Wear orange. They're wearing white. Wear orange. You're orange.
Yeah, that's the thing.
But the smoke, Dan. It's the smoke color of the Smoky Mountains. I get it.
Oh my god. Oh no.
I don't love it, but I get it.
Yeah, that one seems super dicey to me. The next game on the list.
It's an avoid. Stay away. Don't touch.
The next game on my list, College Game Day. They finally made right after not going to Lawrence for the Duke game. They are headed there for the TCU Kansas game. TCU fresh off of kicking the ever-loving shit out of Oklahoma on Saturday. Opened a 5.5 point favorite. They are now a 7 point favorite against our Jayhawks. Matt, you taking the Jayhawks?
I don't know. I'm scared. If it gets to over a touchdown, I would probably lean towards Kansas, but I like them a lot. I think they're really well coached. I think they have a very good quarterback, but I mean, this was still a team with a win total of 2.5 at the beginning of the year, and I think it's still at the beginning stages of a program that's beginning to rebuild, and hopefully Lance Leipold's there long enough to give them a chance to get there. But I think you got a team in TCU that's kind of firing on all cylinders right now, and they're coming off that big win against Oklahoma. And not only are they coming off big win against Oklahoma, but this isn't really a letdown spot anymore because you are going to the number 19 team in the country for College game day. This isn't, a sleepy 11 a.m. start where, you're tucked away on ESPN2. This is now, big billing game, and I think they're going to come ready to play. I think if I had to bet, I'd probably betting on TCU because that offense looks so darn good. And Kansas, while they're a good football team, I'm not sure they're up on that level yet. But makes me sad that I'm leaning against our Jayhawks, Dan.
Yeah, close game, fun game, but a huge game atmosphere makes TCU get hyped up for this one, especially after everyone was saying like last week it's going to be an Oklahoma get-right game, and it was a TCU just absolute whomping. So
those TCU helmets were awesome too.
They were. Yeah, I like the idea that this is not a letdown spot, the big hype, to let you know how dead the Big 12 is as a conference. This is one of the best games of the day, and still Michigan, Indiana got the big noon Saturday slot. This game's on FS1. I don't have much else to add for now. Do some more digging on this, but TCU feels like they're probably the right side here. Kansas was very fortunate to win that game on Saturday. Also at noon on ABC, it's the best rivalry game in college football. Obviously, I'm very biased in that. Texas and Oklahoma from the Cotton Bowl and the State Fair of Texas. You go get your Fletcher's Corny Dog, you get your beer in a paper cup, then you go watch the Longhorns and the Sooners face off of the field split, or the crowd split on the 50-yard line, half orange, half crimson. Weird line movement. Oklahoma was obviously a favorite before Saturday. They were a 3-point favorite. Then Dylan Gabriel gets hurt and they get the shit kicked out of him by TCU. FanDuel still opened it at Oklahoma 2.5 on Sunday morning, and I could not believe that was a thing that they did.
It was?
DraftKings, yeah.
It was 5.5 the other way yesterday, and now 7, right?
Yeah. So FanDuel opened. I guess they must not have actually adjusted it and just opened it. It got hammered.
Seems like that was a mistake on somebody's part.
It was a mistake on someone's part. DraftKings reopened it at 3 for Texas -3. It is now up to 7. I think as it gets out even more, I think we're going to probably hear that Dylan Gabriel's not playing in this game. Venables has said that. Huh?
Is yours playing?
They have not said anything officially, but it seems fairly likely that he's going to make the return, although in a weird twist, Hudson Card probably played his best game at Texas on Saturday against West Virginia. Would seem to indicate that Quinn Ewers is playing, Dylan Gabriel's not. Brent Venables is not saying who he's going to play at quarterback in that game. I obviously won't touch this game because there's just no reason for me to do that objectively. If Dylan Gabriel doesn't play in this game, the only thing that you can point to for Oklahoma and competing in this game and potentially winning it is it's a rivalry game and they usually beat Texas. But this is usually, since Mac Brown was fired or resigned, I guess technically, this has been a cagey rivalry only once decided by more than a single score, and that was in the Big 12 title game when Texas led at halftime. So this is a rivalry game that is always close, and even though Texas, everything, without Dylan Gabriel, Oklahoma is going to probably have to try to lean on the run game, but that's the strength of the Texas defense. Nothing about this suggests that this should be a game that Oklahoma is going to compete in, and yet it's a rivalry game. They feel like this is their right to win this game. Should be very interesting, even if you're not a fan of either team, just because the expectation flipped. Texas a favorite for the first time since 2009 against the Sooners.
And that's why you stay far away from this game. Everything pointing Texas's direction, but rivalry game, it's okay, this is where you just don't, no matter how much you think you know about football, just take a step back and just enjoy this game.
Yep. Yeah, I think Texas should win this game by quite a bit, especially if Quinn Ewers plays. But like you said, even if he doesn't, Hudson Card's playing some pretty darn good football right now too. So if Dylan Gabriel's out, which again, seeing the hit last week and seeing where the line is, it seems like he's going to be. On paper, Texas should win this game by a couple touchdowns, and it's not really close. But on paper, a lot of things should happen in this rivalry that don't seem to always happen. So I'm going to have fun watching this one, but not going anywhere near it in terms of betting it.
And if your team wins and you want to celebrate, or if your team loses, you can just go to the state fair at Jack's French Fries in the Cotton Bowl Plaza and get deep fried honey, which is one of the new food items at the State Fair of Texas this
How do
year.
you do that? Like what?
I
How
don't know.
does
This raw and all natural Texas honey is wrapped and deep fried, producing perfect caramelized honey treat.
wrapped
Topped
in
with
what?
powdered sugar, a cinnamon sugar concoction, and of course Texas raw. So I guess they deep fry it and then they put more honey on it.
They probably
God
make
bless
it's probably like a
Texas.
hard stick of honey
Yeah.
wrapped and then fried. And then when they fry it gets a little bit melty. I'm in on that.
I don't think I
So,
like that. I think that's too
forgot
much.
I forgot to look at this list of new food items at the State Fair of Texas before we did this bit, so I'm just reading as we go here.
I actually like
so
that.
I don't know
Good
what
news segment alert.
Yeah, so this is so this one just caught my eye. I'm not going to read all of them because there's a lot this year, but this one did. It is the deep fried Texas Country Cookout, located at Benavides Foods on the Midway by the Pirate Ship. This hearty dish includes an array of flavors celebrated throughout the great state of Texas. It starts with a healthy serving of well-seasoned pulled pork. Then they mix in a generous amount of herbed goat cheese and homemade special sauce. Their tasty Texas-sized patty is then coated in breadcrumbs to give it just the right amount of crunch in every bite. To finish, it has a dollop of coleslaw and potato salad on top of this deep-fried masterpiece, drizzled with sweet homemade jalapeno barbecue sauce, giving you that delicious Texas twang. Whatever. All the same. So
God bless Texas.
Story time with producer Dan. I'm derailing the show. We've got like 10 more games.
No, you're
left.
fine.
So College Game Day, the guys who do some of the guys who work on the technical side, the guys who drive the production trucks and help set up the set and all that kind of stuff. A couple of them are like certified chefs. And on Fridays, they do this massive cookout for the whole staff. So like production staff, technical staff, set people, like audio people, all of the behind the scenes people. They do this awesome cookout. It's one of the best things ever. They call it the Roadkill Grill. It's fantastic. When we went to the State Fair of Texas in 2011, they couldn't bring all of their equipment in. So instead of doing the cookout for us, they just gave us coupons to go to the fair and get fair food.
Oh, that's awesome.
That's awesome.
So the one thing I did try that was awesome was the deep fried buffalo chicken tender and a flapjack. They literally took a buffalo chicken tender, wrapped it in a pancake, and deep fried it.
So it's like a deep fried chicken and waffle, but pancake instead of waffle.
And waffle. Basically, it was awesome. The State Fair, like literally, like even if you don't care about Texas or Oklahoma, the State Fair setting like puts it over the top in terms of like things you should experience once in your life as a college football fan, because it just adds to the element of all of it. Like if you like a State Fair and football, why would you not go to this game? Enough of that.
Let's do a good job on this show and make Reed send us next year. Live show from the Texas State Fair.
Live from the State Fair of Texas. Purdue at Maryland. Maryland, a 3.5-point favorite, opened at 3. I just put this on the list because this is an interesting game. We didn't really talk about this angle last week because I don't think any of us really expected Purdue to beat Minnesota. It would have been nice to know beforehand that Aiden O'Connell was playing and Mo Ibrahim was not playing in that game.
Yep, that was a little bit of a reversal.
Yep.
Yeah, but that was a Matt's preseason bet versus my preseason bet. Which went Matt's way. And I just put this on the list because this is a really potentially big game for Purdue's chances of winning the division. Purdue wins that game. Like this is one that like, if they win this game, that's really, really going to help them, or they could get tripped up to like mid-level, interesting, could be a fun game if both teams are healthy on offense. That's all I thought.
Yeah, this is now, like you said, this turns into a sneaky huge game for Purdue because that Big Ten West now that they have the tiebreaker on Minnesota, I mean, they had the rough start to the year. They should have beat Penn State, but obviously very well could have beat Penn State, should have, whatever you want to say, right there at home, lost the tough one. They lose the tough one to Syracuse, but like the Syracuse loss doesn't really affect them in their race to win the conference, to go to the conference championship game. And man, that Minnesota win seems like exactly what they needed at the right time. It was one that was trending and looking like it was going to be a loss because they weren't going to get O'Connell, and then O'Connell comes and plays, and they kind of just punch Minnesota in the mouth on the road. Really intrigued to see what we get from Purdue this week. Now we probably have, a fully 100% Aiden O'Connell after, it's not his first game coming back off an injury. I think Maryland's offense is going to be fun. This one seems like it could be a pretty fun shootout, and who would have thought that Purdue and Maryland would be a really fun game that we'd be talking about, but here we are.
Just thank God the divisions are going away.
Moving on, they shouldn't televise executions publicly, but nevertheless, Auburn visits Georgia. It was 13.5 when it opened this summer. Obviously, things have gone a bit awry for Auburn. A 23.5-point spread when it opened up to 29.5. Kind of wish I had jumped on that 23.5 number for Georgia. 29.5 is a lot given how Georgia played, but oof.
talked about this one earlier.
This is
I think this is a Georgia.
So bad.
Their goal should be to get Brian Harsin fired. It's a weird goal, but like that's how bad, like that's how they need to come out and play this weekend. That's the tone they need to set. And I wouldn't go near it because I think Georgia's going to stomp them, but that's a huge spread and who knows what happens. So I'm not going anywhere near it, but my gut tells me this is the real Georgia get right spot after they sleptwalked again through Missouri.
Yeah, the best way to get yourself fired is to not give Tank Bigsby the ball like 15 to 25 times a game. So it's like, hey, we have one of the best running backs in the country. Let's give him the ball 8 times and then lose. So again, it's like I think he's trying to get fired at this point. So I think Georgia just comes in.
He's a Costanza.
Honestly, he's like trying to get fired and he just can't right now. So I hope that Georgia just comes in, gets a little bit right because I have a future on them to win the national championship. So get right, Georgia.
Utah at UCLA. Utah has been absolutely cruising since the Florida game. UCLA got a big win against Washington that they basically dominated Washington, which I wasn't super surprised that they won that game. The Washington defense is not great. It's going to take some time for them to kind of figure some things out there. But nevertheless, a big win for Chip Kelly, who I still don't really understand anything about UCLA. Nevertheless, open Utah -1. It's now out to 4. I might have to, because we're going to this is going to be on the list. I'm going to do some digging and see what I can figure out about UCLA this year because Dorian Thompson-Robinson, Zach Charbonnet. That's going to be that's the only thought that I have on this. And I tweeted it during the game the other night. If Zach Charbonnet plays at the next level, I am willing to bet any sum of money that if he's in an NFL primetime highlight, Chris Berman is going to make wine references about Charbonnet. Mm-hmm. And that's all I got. I'm excited to figure out more about these teams and see more of these teams. Obviously, it may be a little bit of a look-ahead spot for Utah with USC up next week, but UCLA, not a team you can overlook.
No, that was a prove-it week for UCLA last week, and they came out and did. Like, we didn't know much about them, and they came out and, kind of beat the crap out of Washington. So I was very impressed by them. Dorian Thompson-Robinson looked really good, but that was a nice win. This is now like, all right, now show us what you're really made of because Utah is a very good football team.
I was so confident in Washington, which shows I know nothing.
So was everybody, which was like, I think that was another line that like – I
loved
feel like
it.
a lot of people saw it at 2.5. It was like, why?
I bet that on Monday, and I was like, God, I love this line. God, I love Washington. But at least Penix Jr. got our prize pick bet with 345.
Yeah, Malik Cunningham came nowhere near it. He was terrible. But my over did hit in that, so my loss. My over in Washington UCLA hit.
North Carolina at Miami opened Miami -4.5, dropped a point to 3.5. This is just going to be a fascinating game. I think this is a game both teams really, really need. North Carolina, I mean, I guess Notre Dame was the only game they lost, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but North Carolina, like they're an interesting team. Their offense is really good. Drake May is really good. Their receivers are now all healthy and very good. So like this is a game I'm thinking about hammering North Carolina because like Miami's not very good. Neither defense is that great, but like if this turns into a trap, I mean, Miami's defense is okay. North Carolina's defense is so bad, but I think it becomes into a track meet a little bit. North Carolina just absolutely outruns them. North Carolina's receivers being healthy or like they're good. They're really good. Josh Downs and Green something.
I was texting you, Phil, during the slate last week saying, I'm so mad at myself I didn't hammer UNC -8 against Virginia Tech because I just absolutely love that line. I didn't think Virginia Tech stood a chance or was going to be able to score, and I thought North Carolina's offense was going to put up a ton of points. That's exactly what happened. I kind of tend to lean towards them here. I think that offense found something, and while the defense shut down Virginia Tech, it was still somewhat of like a get-right spot for them, and maybe they're playing a little better. Miami's offense has just been so bad, and they have a really conservative head coach, Mario Cristobal. Like, I want to take North Carolina's money line in this one. I'm a little bit worried about it because Miami's had the bye, and it's a must win for Miami after some really, really bad losses. I know the A&M losses, the farther we get away from that, doesn't look good. Obviously, the Middle Tennessee State loss was a really bad one. Like, this is kind of a must win spot for them, but I think North Carolina's better. I have no idea which way I'm going to bet this one or if I am.
I've got nothing. I would just caution you of Miami 2 weeks to prepare for this off of one of the most embarrassing losses that program's had in a very long time. Mm-hmm. Scares me a little bit to take Miami or to take North Carolina there. The next game I just think is the best group of 5 game of the week. Western Kentucky at UTSA open 5.5, now 6.5. UTSA favored. Nothing to say other than both games last year were complete and utter gong shows. UTSA, I feel like, is playing a close game every week. I got to figure out when and where this game is being televised, because it should make one of my screens. I got nothing else to add. hope it's a fun
I
game.
got nothing on this one.
Nothing on
Fun
this
game.
one.
Washington State at USC, open 14. USC now a 12.5-point favorite. Matt, I know you bet this on Brown Bag this morning. I don't really have any thoughts. I mean, I think we've kind of talked about USC and how fortunate they've been at times this year. I'm potentially a look ahead to Utah also for them. Should be kind of an interesting game. Washington State looking for a nice bounce back rebound spot after the Oregon debacle.
Yeah, scares me a little bit that Washington State's on the road, but I think that's a lot of points. I think Washington State's been playing pretty good football this year. They've played some pretty decent teams and look pretty good doing it. I mean, Cal's defense is pretty solid. They put up 28 points there. They played Oregon. Obviously, that was at home, but like really, really well and should have won that football game. And another thing you and I talked about this morning, Dan, like USC has been very good this year. That offense is electric, but man, there has just been a lot of luck that has like not figurative luck, just in terms of turnover luck, in terms of, bounces going their way, in terms of Caleb Williams prayers, falling into the correct hands. Like everything has been going their way so far this year. And I think at some point that's going to have to change. And I think they're going up against maybe the best team they've played so far this year in Washington State. I mean, them and Oregon State, but obviously they have this one at home, but like, probably the best quarterback they've seen thus far as well. And while Cam Ward hasn't been the best at taking care of the football, like if he can do that in this one and keep the ball away from USC, like I think Washington State has a chance to win this game.
Yeah, and I talked earlier in the season, like Washington State has the opportunity to play spoiler this year, and like this is the perfect spot for them to be a spoiler. And God, I hope so, because the plus 14 turnover margin is like historically completely unheard of. Just in there, like. Almost just the luck that they're having. Again, call it luck. They're still making plays. Like people can call it luck. Their defense is still making plays, which people didn't expect them to. So I'm excited to watch this one, staying far away from it from a betting perspective, because don't know what Washington State team is going to come out. Don't know what USC offense is going to come out.
I got nothing. The next one on my list, I'm going to move and save that one for the end. I'll go FSU, North Carolina State, bounce back spot for both of these teams. 3.5 was the opening line. NC State favored by 3. This might just be a simple fact of the matter is I don't really think that either team is particularly dominant over the other, and it's at NC State. So
just give me FSU in a complete bet with your heart, not your head, bet of the week.
I kind of lean NC State. I think Devin Leary is really good, but that's I don't know what's going to happen in this one.
I might end up betting NC State in that game. Then second to last one, we talked about it a bit. Texas A&M, Alabama. Was a 16-point Alabama spread over the summer, opened 20.5 and got bet up to 23.5. Kind of wish I had bet the 20.5 again. That's why you bet these things early. I probably think Alabama by about 3 touchdowns feels about right to me. If Bryce Young can grip the ball and throw the ball, I think Texas A&M is going to have a bad time. I think we can probably move on quickly from this because Matt made the request that we don't talk about Texas A&M anymore. And I
didn't make that request. I guess I did actually make that.
Yeah, you did make that request.
I said after this game, though. I said we can talk about this game, and then after this game, we don't talk about them anymore. I think this is Texas A&M is down. Nick Saban sees that they're down, and Nick Saban obviously remembers what the whole Jimbo thing in the offseason. I don't think he likes that. And I think this is going to be a chance for him to really just jab at a down program that he kind of wants to get back at, especially for the loss last year. I think there's a whole lot of bad blood on Alabama. Maybe not bad blood, but you know what I mean. Motivation on Alabama's side that Nick Saban's going to stir up a narrative. And I cannot stress this enough. A&M's offense is so incredibly bad. Like Mississippi State is a fine football team. They are an above average SEC football team. They're probably going to hit that over 6.5 win total that I gave out earlier this year. But
I like how
that's about it.
That in.
Those aren't going terribly well for me. So when I have one, I gotta pump the tires.
That was another thing that happened this weekend that I want to talk about. I'll save it. Sorry.
I was just gonna say Mississippi State just controlled that game from start to finish. A&M was never really in it. Even the score wasn't always out of reach, but A&M never really stood a chance in that one. Their offense stinks. Their play calling is all the team's just not very good. And I think Bama rediscovered last week that we can win with Bryce Young. Or if he's not hurt, we're Alabama up front, and we have one of the best running backs in the country, so we'll just run the ball down your throat. So I think Bama figures out a win this game, and I'm not sure A&M scores.
Yeah, this is vultures circling a dying animal.
The one thing I wanted to add before we get to the last game I have on my list, has a school ever fired a coach a year after he led them to their best season in 40 years? Because Pat Narduzzi being so mad about the fact that Pittsburgh just liked to throw the ball last year, that he completely changed what they did on offense and then turned around and lost to fucking Georgia Tech last week, which completely screws my Georgia Tech win total. Because now they've got two.
Yet.
They've won two. They're going to beat Virginia's awful. Georgia Tech.
So are they.
Virginia. They are, but they actually have a coach who they might like. They're probably going to beat Virginia because I think that game's at home too. Like they're potentially going to beat Virginia. I liked your Duke pick today, by the way, on that. I do think Duke's going to win that game, but like they're going to find another one, and I got screwed. Just to hell with Pat Narduzzi. All right, the last one. I say this one for last. Best game of the day. I don't know if that's true, but hey, you guys are Notre Dame fans. 9.5 Notre Dame over the summer. It has dropped to a 2.5 point opener. Now your Fighting Irish are 3.5 point favorites and a neutral site at
Vegas.
Vegas
Allegiant
Stadium in Las Vegas against BYU. All I will say is that these are two teams with I have no thought on this game whatsoever. I will just say that these two teams have two of the most classic looks in college football. And because Notre Dame's playing a neutral site game, they've decided to gussy up their classic look with their uniforms, which are okay. I will say a little bit.
In fairness, they do this every year.
I know they do, and I hate it every year. And BYU, their royal blue or whatever they call it, is such a beautiful look. And they're wearing all black with that like radiant black and blue helmet. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. Notre Dame, road whites with the gold domes, which the gold domes are staying, but the road whites. BYU with their home blues with the blue helmets. Classic uniform match.
But this is technically a Notre Dame home game, though.
Yeah, whatever. They're wearing white uniforms, though. So, like,
Dan, I don't disagree with you. It's been like 10 years now that they've been doing this kind of every year, and like I get it. They're doing it to sell some more merch and make some more money, and having the neutral site game makes them a lot more money, and that's fine. I think I've just gotten kind of numb to it. Like the first year they did it, I didn't like it. Now I've just kind of accepted it. Like it happens. They're going to do it once a year. And I do think of all the alternate, fun stadium or what Shamrock Series uniforms they've done. I do think these are by far the coolest. I think they're pretty I think they're pretty sweet. They're also pretty tame. Like there's some gold design on it, but like it's pretty much all white with a gold helmet.
Everyone knows if you're wearing these jerseys, like Notre Dame's going to look fast this weekend.
They're going to look.
It's only science. Anyone who's ever played football, you put on white cleats, a white jersey, and a white pants.
Suddenly it adds 0.2 of a second to your 40.
Yeah, Matt was.
You go from a 4.4 to a 4.2 real quick. I went from a 6.1 to a 5.9.
Yeah, Matt, were you trying to 5? My just thoughts on this game. Honestly, I think Notre Dame's offensive and defensive lines have really picked things up the last 2 weeks. And if you've watched BYU the last few weeks, their second level really doesn't like tackling. They've really been struggling to tackle, which is a bad recipe for Notre Dame's like new kind of emerging running back in Audric Estime, who's 5'11", 230 pounds, who carried a North Carolina. There was I'll share a clip on Twitter, but a North Carolina defender made initial contact at I think it was like the 40-yard line, and was dragged going straight backwards until the 49-yard line, just straight back. So he's a back where I think this game is close in the first half, and then Notre Dame's lines wear them down, and ultimately they're just going to get tired of tackling Audric Estime, and Notre Dame wins by, comfortably by anywhere from like 10 to 17 points. I just don't believe in BYU's ability to tackle this game, and that's really what it's going to come down to.
Yeah, it seems like in the second half of that Cal game that I don't know what happened in the locker room or what switch flipped or what adjustments were made, but both on the defensive line and the offensive line, Notre Dame seems to have found something. And I know it was against terrible North Carolina defense, but they seem to find a conservative-ish play calling plan, offensive game plan. Jeez, couldn't think of the word for Drew Pine that made him feel comfortable enough that didn't ask him to do too much. It seems like Tommy Rees is kind of figuring it out there, and this is kind of becoming the team that we thought they might be at the beginning of the season, one that controls the play on both lines of scrimmage and kind of, is opportunistic offensively and defensively. I lean towards them as long as the spread stays, under 4-ish. But yeah, I think this is a game that if we see the same offensive and defensive lines that we've seen since the second half of the Cal game, I do think they win this football game.
I got nothing to add.
That's fair.
So on that note, do you guys have anything else?
No, the sun has really been shifting from this window, and it's like it's right in my eyes now.
I was gonna say the lighting on you for the last like 20 minutes has been spectacular.
Yeah, so it's like
Natural
there's like
lighting
just a
has been
big
good.
window kind of up like on the side of the wall here, and like as the sun's been kind of going down, the more of it's just getting right into me. That's
Also,
okay.
on that note, I think we need to wrap this up because Phil's feed is definitely frozen.
Oh yeah, that's frozen.
Phil has been stuck in the same spot
or he's just really pondering that he's
Yeah.
really taking a look at my lighting.
Phil, blink if you can hear me. Man, no,
Phil can't hear you.
And so he's gone.
There he
He's
is.
He's gone. He gone. So on that note, we'll wrap it up for the newly departed Phil. For Matt, I'm Dan. If I can get my mouse to work, there it is. We will talk to you guys on Thursday.